Hello everyone, I'm Ozic, head instructor of K-Edu English with 30 years of teaching experience. Welcome to the lecture on basic grammar, the verb be. First, let's briefly take a look at the table of contents. The word be isn't just a verb, it also has an important root meaning. We'll start with that briefly, then go into its grammatical role as a verb, and especially how it works with nouns or pronouns to express identity, forming the most basic framework of English sentences. Next, I'll walk you through 7 key points to be aware of. These are important points that are frequently tested in exams. And after that, I'll introduce a few suffixes that are used to express identity and give us a peek into the native speaker's way of thinking. All these topics will be approached with plenty of examples, where I'll also explain vocabulary, pronunciation, stress, linking, and intonation. After that, you will then work on practice questions, which include types commonly found on official exams. While most can be solved by following the lectures, some require additional knowledge or practice. Still, with a little creativity, you'll be able to solve them. And even if you get them wrong, don't worry. Once you hear the explanations, everything will click. As I mentioned in English Myths and Facts, the exercises are designed around the idea of learning through discovery, which means mistakes actually help you learn even more. Now, of course, we also need to practice applying this to real use, right? Since this isn't an in-person class, there are some limitations, but I've prepared extra materials so you can practice both shadowing and listening. The lecture itself, including the practice questions, is divided into 5 parts, and I've prepared additional resources in separate videos. So then why do we start with the verb be? It's because it makes up a staggering 30% of English usage. As I showed you in English Myths and Facts, the be verb accounts for around 20% in real-life use. And if you add in its visible or invisible functions in other grammatical structures, like the 5-sentence patterns, its share rises to 30%, making it the backbone of English. That's why you must never ignore it. You need to build a solid foundation right from the start. A couple of things to note before we jump in. Since this class is quite different from what you've experienced before, and it's also our first lesson together, I'll take some time to explain in detail the most effective way to approach it. We won't really worry too much about grammar terms here. When you look at the example sentences, you'll probably see some words for the first time, but I purposely didn't add their meanings. In fact, in most cases, I won't explain them separately either. Instead, I'll just show you how they make sense inside the sentence. So don't try to memorize them word by word. You already know that's a waste of time. Some examples might feel a bit tough, but that's intentional. I included those on purpose, so don't let them throw you off. Other than the main focus, in this case, be verb, noun, and pronouns, I won't go deep into other grammar. I'll just leave that aside for later. If you keep practicing, your brain will naturally pick it up. And when you go back and review, you'll probably even catch a few little Easter eggs I've hidden in there. Makes it more fun that way. We'll dive deeper into this in the speaking class, but even here, I'll be paying extra attention to pronunciation and stress. If your goal is to actually speak English, of course you need to work on that. But even if your goal is something else, like preparing for an exam, you should still care about it. Trust me, it's not a waste of time. This is how you seriously speed up your progress. As mentioned in the English Myths and Facts video, my lectures follow an interleaving approach that you may not have experienced before, so it might feel unfamiliar at first. However, once you adapt to it, you will realize that there is no method more effective than this. Let me repeat this one more time. Don't memorize words separately. Just get used to the whole sentence first. That way the words stick on their own. Of course, you'll need to review and do shadowing. But again, that's not wasting time. It actually saves time. From my own experience, it's the fastest and most reliable way to make the words truly yours. You can grab the class materials from our website, oziicedu.com, but you can still follow the class without them. We designed the lesson and examples to be a little challenging, based on different exam materials and how often English is used in real life. If you'd like to use these materials somewhere else, just check with us first and make sure to credit the source. Most of the names you'll see in the examples were created and used strictly for teaching purposes. They have absolutely nothing to do with real people or entities. The class materials are 23 pages long, including practice exercises formatted for A4 paper. You can register on the website, download them, print them out, and then follow along. The content is really packed. But if printing isn't an option, no problem. You can simply split your screen while watching. Using a digital pen works too. And if you're on Windows, just press the Windows key with the arrow key to split the screen in half. Depending on your device, the process may vary, so check your manual if needed. Again, it's totally fine if you don't download anything, you'll still be able to enjoy the class. Don't forget, grammar is just a tool for communication. All right then, let's get started. The word be has its root all the way back in Proto-Indo-European, and it's been evolving since Old English, so it's a very ancient word. It plays a lot of grammatical roles, but first and foremost, it's the main verb that expresses existence or identity, a linking verb, and it's also used as an auxiliary verb. In fact, it's the most frequently used and most important verb in English. The sound just now was a signal not to worry too much about grammar terms. At the same time, be has an important root history, and over time it's evolved as it combined with other simple words we already know, and right here we can get the little glimpse into the way people thought back then. First, it combines with come. In other words, it meets the word that means to come somewhere, to arrive, but it's not just anything that comes. There's this strong idea that only the right or fitting thing should come. That's why the meaning to match or to fit was added later. And from there, it evolved into the meaning to become one with something that matches, or simply to change. It really helps if you picture that image in your head. But at the same time, you also need to know the pronunciation and the stress. According to the IPA, the stress is on the second syllable. Even the word engineer has its stress on the last part. Now, we're going to look at some example sentences. If these examples feel a bit difficult right now, you can just review this part lightly. Still though, I want you to pay special attention to pronunciation, stress, linking, and intonation. Yes, intonation can shift a little depending on the situation, but if you keep in mind the stress and the usual intonation patterns, you'll notice these rises and falls in pitch. And finally, this sentence is very simple, but even if it feels awkward at first, we'll practice reading it in their word order until it feels natural. Of course, if the word order in your native language is the same as in English, that makes things easier. But if it's different, I really recommend you practice taking in the information exactly in this English word order. Again, I already talked about this importance in English myths and facts. Here's the sentence. She hoping changing into an engineer. That's how it goes in English. All right then. Let's listen to it.
She wants to become an engineer.
Next, it combines with fall, which originally means to drop. This came from the old belief that when a star fell, something was bound to happen. From that idea, the meaning evolved into a fateful event happening, especially when it's an unfortunate event. Now, let's look at an example. The word befall has the stress on the second syllable. And if you keep in mind the stress of the other, simpler words in the sentence, the intonation naturally goes like this. Here's the sentence. Fame not dropping to all artists. In other words, not every artist becomes famous. It's a bit different from how we would usually phrase it, right? Okay then, let's listen to it.
Fame does not befall every artist.
Next, it combines with long, the verb meaning to yearn or to desire. This word first appeared in Middle English. But the idea was that you shouldn't just long for anything, you were supposed to long only for what was truly suitable for you. That thought later expanded into wanting only the right position for yourself. And from there, it evolved into today's meaning of to be a member of or to be related to. The stress falls on the second syllable. And if you consider the stress of the other words in the sentence, the intonation goes like this. He is a member of a group of lawyers. All right, let's listen to it.
He belongs to a group of lawyers.
Now let's move on to have. You probably already know it as to own, but originally it meant to control oneself. Over time, when it combined with be, it took on the meaning of to act in a socially acceptable way. Simply put, it came to mean to act. Here, the stress is again on the second syllable, and watch out the pronunciation. It's not have, but have. And when you take the stress of the other words into account, the intonation goes like this. You need to always act and do like a true doctor. Try practicing by absorbing it in your head in exactly that word order. Okay, let's listen.
You must always behave like a true doctor.
The word love, I'm sure nobody here is unfamiliar with it, right? There has always been this universal idea that if you love, you have to trust. Doesn't matter the time, the place, seems like a common human belief. In its evolution, only the spelling changed a little. Again, the stress is on the second syllable. And if you take the stress of the other words into account, the intonation naturally goes like this. My belief is that firefighters are very brave. Practice taking it in with the native word order in your head. Okay then, let's listen.
I believe that firefighters are very brave.
Next up, the word friend. Easy, right? And befriend isn't too hard either. It means to become friends. But you need to be careful. It doesn't go together with the preposition with. Why? Because the word itself already contains that sense of with. In other words, it means exactly become friends with someone. That kind of verb is called a transitive verb, but don't worry, I'll explain that in detail later. Here again, the stress is on the second syllable, and when you add in the stress of the other words in the sentence, the intonation works like this. We enjoy to make friends with a new teacher at the book club. It's okay, right? Let's listen.
We like to befriend a new teacher in our book club.
Now the word little, again, something everyone knows. This word actually came from the US, not Britain. Over time, it developed the meaning of making someone or something seem less important or less valuable. And it's often used when talking about achievements, opinions, or the existence of people, basically to underestimate. The stress is again on the second syllable, and with the stress from the rest of the words. The intonation goes like this. He, downplaying, nurses, when. He talks about medicine. The meaning comes through clearly, right? Okay. Let's listen.
He belittles nurses when he talks about medicine.
Now, hold. Of course, its basic meaning is to grasp. But in literature, the word behold got extended to mean to admire something held in your hands. From there, it evolved further into the modern sense of to watch closely. The stress is on the second syllable, and don't forget, the pronunciation here is not ho, but ho-u with a longer sound. The intonation goes like this. In this example, the phrase lo and behold means something like look here or see for yourself. It used to be mostly in letters, but nowadays it often pops up in conversation to show surprise, almost like an exclamation. I turning the corner, and wow, guess what? My lost cat was standing right there. Let's listen.
I turned the corner and, lo and behold, there was my lost cat.
Do you see the common thread? All verbs that come from the be root have their stress on the second syllable. And that wraps up our explanation of be as an etymological root. Considering this is still the basic course, it may feel a little advanced, so it's totally fine to just review this part lightly. Alright then, now let's talk about be as a main verb. If we compare it to math, be works like the equal sign. It's mostly used to express identity or status. And usually, with be in the center, you'll find nouns on both sides. The word noun comes from Latin and simply means name, and it uses the Chinese character for name. But don't worry too much about the grammar terms themselves. So here are some examples. Tom's identity, a singer. In other words, Tom is equal to a singer. Jane's status, a rapper. In other words, Jane is equal to a rapper. This little red circle here shows that it's in spoken style. Michael's identity, a homebody. In other words, Michael is equal to someone who enjoys being at home. Celine's identity, an icon. In other words, Celine is equal to a highly influential person. These examples use simple words, but don't forget to check the stress. Even people's names have stress. In your class materials, the stress marks are written on the right-hand side, so if you highlight those, it'll be easier later when you review. And now, here's how the intonation goes. Let's listen.
Tom is a singer. Jane is the rapper. Michael is the homebody. Celine is an icon.
Of course, be is also used when denying or rejecting a certain status or identity. For example, Todd's identity, not someone who is silly or stupid. When we shorten it, it becomes like this. In other words, Todd is not the same as a fool. Now, the word we usually call sofa is actually couch, and the phrase couch potato is an informal expression mostly used in American English. It humorously describes a very lazy person who spends long hours watching TV and eating potato chips instead of exercising or doing physical activity. You can think of it as meaning simply a lazy person. Kim's identity, not a couch potato. When we shorten it, it becomes like this. Kim is not the same as a lazy person. Now, if we take stress into account, here's how the intonation goes. Let's listen.
Todd is not a goofball. Todd isn't a goofball. Kim is not a couch potato. Kim isn't a couch potato.
This little green circle, you see marks a or the. These are called articles. Depending on the situation, they change a bit and are often placed before nouns. But for now, we'll just ignore them. These two sentences are quite easy, right? Still, if you look at stress placement, the intonation works like this. Let's listen.
My name is Olivia. His name is not Jeff.
I've emphasized that the purpose of learning grammar is for communication, and this impacts various fields such as conversation and reading comprehension. Now let's examine why understanding identity or status is important. In daily life, recognizing one's own or others' identity is crucial, and we unconsciously already understand its importance. Understanding one's own or another's identity is a core element for ensuring authenticity. Honest disclosure of identity based on a sense of belonging or psychological stability also has a positive effect on mental health. Moreover, it helps to form genuine relationships with others. In short, it provides the foundation for smooth communication based on trust. A prime example is the identity of a witness in court trials. Suppose Company A claims that Company B secretly copied their patented source code to develop a product and earn huge profits, and Company A's lawyer calls a witness. The witness swears an oath and testifies, technically the source codes are similar, the method of assigning serial numbers is identical, and even the way it is implemented on the screen is the same. What if this witness is an internal developer of Company A? While not lacking credibility, the witness might be suspected of bias due to being an insider. What if the witness is, by the same name, a third-party hacker? Although technically the testimony could be valid, hackers generally have a negative stereotype related to ethical issues, which may weaken the persuasive power of their testimony in court. However, if the witness is a renowned professor in the coding field who holds many related patents and has no interest in Company A, the credibility of his or her testimony is very high. Thus, identifying identity greatly affects the reliability of communication, and no verb is as efficient as the be verb to express identity. When presenting or accepting evidence for an argument, and even in reading comprehension, identifying identity is very important. For example, if you want to support the claim, for health, you should eat 10 peanuts and 5 tomatoes every morning with olive oil, you might present as evidence someone saying, since I started eating that every day, I feel energetic and my skin improved. If that statement comes from your neighbor, who is just an ordinary housewife, its credibility is low and thus the evidence base is weak. However, if a person who farmed for over 70 years says a similar thing, the claim has more persuasive power because we can suppose that Mrs. Wilson is about 90 years old. If the same Mrs. Wilson were a doctor presenting professional facts, the persuasiveness would be much stronger. Moreover, if a Nobel Prize-winning medical doctor said it, whether the argument is true or not, we would likely rush to the store to buy peanuts, tomatoes, and olive oil. In other words, the more professional the identity, the stronger the trust and persuasiveness attributed to the statement, whether the statement is true or not. There is no verb as effective as the be verb in expressing identity, and that is also a major reason we are learning the be verb now. All right, remember in English myths and facts when we looked at the origins of language through pictures? We especially explained the roots of words that express identity, also through images, right? Now take a look at this example sentence. The name Sebastian shows up 3 times. And the word car also repeats. It's very clear, yes, but honestly, it feels a bit too long and a little awkward. So here's how we can shorten it using pronouns. Sebastian likes his car because he thinks it's really pretty. Now, keeping stress and intonation in mind, let's listen.
Sebastian likes Sebastian's car because Sebastian thinks that the car is very beautiful. Sebastian likes his car because he thinks that it is very beautiful.
How does that sound? Simple and convenient, right? And absolutely no problem at all for communication. That's exactly the role of what we call pronouns. The word means for a noun, in place of a noun. Just like in Latin in Asia, we also use the Chinese character meaning to replace. But again, don't worry too much about the terminology. Now I want to introduce something very important, something that will probably stay with you your whole life. The subject. This is the part of the sentence that shows the main character of the action or the state. The predicate. This is the part of the sentence that describes that action or state. Here, action refers to movement and state means a situation with no movement, often showing feelings or existence. That's why, in Asia, the character meaning to move is used to name verbs. Again, don't stress the labels too much, but just remember, in English, subject and verb are very important, and so, for short, we'll simply use the letters S and V. Okay, now with stress and intonation in mind, let's listen.
He is my son. Julie is her daughter.
We've also taken a brief look at the history of English. Just like your own native languages, English has gone through a lot of changes. Specifically, it evolved through Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. And of course, the verb be also evolved along the way. Now let's look at how the possessive form developed. In particular, the distinction marked by the triangle symbol, the difference between masculine and neuter, was confusing. That's how it eventually evolved into what we now see in modern English. We call this the possessive case. In grammar, that means the form that shows whose it is. So how do we mark it? For people's names, we usually add an apostrophe and an S at the end. Here's an example. Listen carefully, paying attention to both stress and intonation.
Iris's sneakers are blue and white. This is John's scanner.
Now, when a person's name ends with S, there are actually two ways to write the possessive. One is to write it the regular way, and the other is to just add the apostrophe without another S. Until fairly recently, each name had its own rules, which made things very complicated, but thankfully now it's much simpler. After all, native speakers don't like complicated things either. Here's an example sentence. James doesn't have his monitor on his desk. Let's listen. And remember, whether you write it with just the apostrophe or with apostrophe plus S, the pronunciation is the same. Focus on that.
James's monitor is not on his desk. James's monitor isn't on his desk.
Now, if it's something other than a person's name, for singular nouns, it works just like we saw above. But for plural nouns, since they already usually end with S, you normally just add an apostrophe. Example sentences: this medicine for pain works all night. The elevator doors open by themselves. Since these are plural forms ending with S, you only need to add the apostrophe. But this next example is different. That's because the word children is plural. Yes, it doesn't end with S. So in this case, you must add both the apostrophe and the S. And let me emphasize it once again. Don't memorize individual words. Get used to the full sentences. Since I'm already explaining the meaning of words within the sentences, you can pause the video from time to time, take notes, and keep going at your pace. Now let's listen carefully again, paying close attention to stress and intonation.
These painkillers' effects last all night. The elevator's doors open automatically. The children's playground is next to the school.
Don't worry about difficult grammar terms. It may look complicated, but we can sum it up very simply. No matter if it's a person or a thing, singular or plural, if the word ends in S, just add an apostrophe. If it does not end in S, add an apostrophe plus S. That's really all you need to remember. There are many different kinds of pronouns, but here we'll start with personal pronouns, words that stand in for people or things. You already know the items in this chart, right? So don't worry about the heavy grammar terms for now. In this lecture, we'll just focus on this part. And remember, don't try to memorize them. As you keep using them, you'll naturally get used to them. First, let's look at the first person. These are pronouns the speaker uses to refer to himself or herself, or to themselves together with others. For example, I don't teach biology, but I teach chemistry. In some situations, this can be shortened like this. I'm not an English major, but I study history. I don't teach yoga, but I teach Pilates. I don't film movies, but I take photos. Not many difficult words here, right? Now pay close attention to pronunciation and stress. Especially with yoga and Pilates, the English pronunciation is quite different from what we tend to say, so listen carefully. Biology, chemistry, English, history, student, yoga, instructor, Pilates, trainer, movie, cameraman, photographer. Now let's repeat after the native speaker. If it feels too fast, just use the pause button in the middle and be sure to make use of your review time and shadowing practice.
I am not a biology teacher. I am your chemistry teacher. I'm not a biology teacher. I'm your chemistry teacher. I'm not an English student. I'm a history student. I'm not a yoga instructor. I'm a Pilates trainer. I am not the movie's cameraman. I'm its photographer.
Don't dismiss the first-person pronoun as being too easy. It shows up all the time, even in very famous lines. For example, Louis XIV is said to have left this remark. The original French goes like this. In English, the literal translation would be my identity, the nation itself. In short, I am the state. Let's listen.
I am the state.
It also appears very often in pop songs. Take Sting's famous song, Englishman in New York. The lyrics describe a foreign person allowed by the law, an Englishman living in New York. Here, Sting expresses the ironic identity of being both an outsider and a local at the same time. His very British accent mixed with the strongly American jazz saxophone sound really highlights that irony. Another example, from the legendary duo Simon and Garfunkel. There's that well-known line, I am a rock, I am an island. The song is about building emotional walls to avoid the pain that love or friendship can bring, choosing solitude instead. We should also talk about the difference between a and an, but I'm going to skip that explanation for now. You'll naturally pick it up as we go along, and I'll explain it in detail later. And here's another hugely famous one, Leonard Cohen's ballad where he sings, If you want someone to love you, I am here. I can be that man for you. His deep voice and the simple, addictive chord progression made the song iconic. Even today, it often appears in commercials, instantly recognizable as soon as the intro starts. We also see the first-person pronoun in legendary movie lines. In Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio's character climbs the ship's railing and shouts that famous line, I'm the king of the world. Later, director James Cameron echoed the same line when he won his Academy Award. But perhaps the most famous of all, an unforgettable Star Wars scene. When the enemy leader, thought to be nothing but the villain, reveals the shocking truth, I am your father. It's still remembered as one of the most iconic moments in film history. Now let's check the stress carefully. Don't focus too much on the individual word meanings. Just keep getting familiar through sentences. Let's listen.
I'm a legal alien. I'm an Englishman in New York.
I am a rock. I am an island.
If you want a lover, here I stand. I'm your man.
I am the king of the world.
No, I am your father.
The first person we can also mean the whole group that the speaker belongs to. For example, we don't lose, we win. This can also be shortened. We are not scary or bad creatures, which is a famous movie line. And a very famous song lyric almost everyone knows. We are the best. We don't have time for people who lose because we are the best. It's from the band Queen. There is also a line from a movie about Abraham Lincoln, especially during the Civil War. The North and South, we are not people who want to fight or hurt each other, we are friends. But one of the most famous ones is this song lyric. In the 1980s, about 45 famous American singers came together to sing for children dying in Africa because of bad weather. Michael Jackson helped write the song, making it even more well-known. The lyrics say, we all belong to God's big family. We are the people of the world. We are the children. This metaphorical and very universal message made the song very popular. It is known to have raised millions of dollars for charity. Now listen carefully, paying attention to stress.
We are not losers. We are winners. We aren't losers. We are winners.
We are not monsters.
We are the champions. No time for losers, because we are the champions of the world.
We are not enemies, but friends.
We are all a part of God's great big family. We are the world. We are the children.
Now we finish part 1 of this lesson. In this video, we looked at the verb be, its origin and its main role as a key verb in English. We also examined the first-person pronouns that pair with the be verb. The story continues in part 2. The verb be is very important, like the backbone of English, so you must review it carefully. Pay extra attention to pronunciation, stress, and intonation as you practice listening and speaking. Also, remember that learning the meaning of words within sentences is important, so don't skip your review. Of course, try writing short diary entries or simple letters using what you learned. See you in part 2. Thank you.